Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the John Burton Foundation webinar, Supporting Success Post-Secondary Education in the Era of AB12. We are going to get started. It is now 10:05. This webinar is being co-sponsored by the Northern Training Academy, so welcome to those on today's call. Just some logistical and technical details. You will see on the right-hand side of your screen an ability to ask some questions and ask live questions as you come up with them. So please go ahead and click send on your questions, and I will be monitoring those questions. We will have time for some questions at the end of the webinar presentation. And all presentation materials and an archive audio of this webinar will be posted at the California Fostering Connections website, noted there on the slide. And if you want to bring this to your local community, you can contact Debbie Rauscher at Debbie at johnburtonfoundation.org, and these trainings are available in person in your local community. We will also send out an email to everyone on this webinar with the PowerPoint, so you will have that in your inbox. And with that, I'm going to turn it over. We've got Debbie Rauscher with the John Burton Foundation, who is now the Project Director for the California College Pathways Project, and Chelsea with First Place for Youth. She is a former foster youth and currently attending college at Cal State University East Bay.
Great, thank you so much, Devin. So I want to just echo Devin in saying welcome to everybody on the call. We're very excited to have so many folks on the call, including those of you who are joining us from the Northern California Training Academy. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump in here, and as Devin indicated, if you do have questions, you can go ahead and use the questions panel to send them to us throughout the presentation, and then we'll be responding to all the questions at the end. So to start out, we're going to give some background about foster youth and education. We know that last year in California, over 4,600 foster youth aged out of care. There was a survey that was done with youth who were in foster care in preparation for the implementation of AB12, in which 83% of youth surveyed indicated that they had a desire to go to college. Despite this, studies show that only 25% of foster youth will complete 1 year of college, and only 5% will obtain a 2-year or 4-year degree. So what we see from this is that there's obviously a big disconnect between the goals and desires that foster youth have and the reality of what they're currently attaining. So one question that people might ask is that, why does this matter? And so one of the reasons that this matters so much is because because of the difference that exists in income and employment stability based on higher education. So you can see from the chart that's on the screen that the difference between having, say, a high school diploma and a bachelor's degree is really significant in terms of the income that somebody is able to attain. So you're looking at $400 a month or a week difference in income based on having more access to education. And over the course of somebody's lifetime, this can add up to several $100,000. So there's really, the picture is worth 1,000 words, and the chart really demonstrates that difference. In addition, you can also see the difference in job stability. So when you hear about, in the current recession, people talk about the unemployment rate at 8% or 9%, and one of the things that is not necessarily made clear when you talk about those numbers is that something like the current recession does not impact all people the same. And so if you don't have a high school diploma, the unemployment rate is close to 15%. whereas if you have a bachelor's degree, it's about a third of that. So there really is a dramatic difference when something it hits like a recession. Having access to more education really makes a significant difference. In addition, there are a lot of other non-monetary benefits to having more education. There's studies that show that there's improved health and well-being, increased civic participation, and individuals' own children are more likely to attend college. Finally, the fastest growing industries today are all industries that do require some level of post-secondary education. So the fields like healthcare, education, business support services, these are the fields that are growing the fastest, whereas service positions like clerks, cashiers, packagers, that type of thing are the fields that are actually shrinking the most at this time. So as time goes on, access to post-secondary education becomes more and more important. So what are some of the challenges that foster youth currently face when considering participating in post-secondary education? I would imagine for many of you on the call, the factors that you see in front of you look very familiar, probably based on your own experience. You could have come up with these as well. So not having access to adequate housing, not having the financial resources to attend college, frequent changes in home and school, leaving youth unprepared academically for post-secondary education, not having role models to look to, and simply not having the information that they need about post-secondary education, financial aid, admissions requirements, etc. So one of the things that I'm happy to be able to report is that AB12 is going to address many of these issues. So most of you probably know that AB12 is the extension of foster care to age 21 that went into effect January of this year. So youth who are in the foster care system can now continue to receive benefits through the foster care system until they turn 21, which is a very significant change from the system that existed previously when foster care ended at the age of 18. So AB12 is going to provide a number of things that will help address the challenges that youth do face when considering post-secondary education. So youth will have access to housing through an approved placement. This is obviously a very significant factor that is going to make it easier for youth to be able to participate in post-secondary education. In some cases, youth may actually receive the benefit directly. So there's a new placement option through AB12 known as the supervised independent living placement, which actually allows a young person to live on their own in an apartment or college dorm or shared housing and actually receive payment directly themselves. Youth will continue to have monthly visits with a social worker, which will help to provide assistance with the transition to independence. And youth will continue to have access to health insurance until the age of 21 through Medi-Cal and independent living services. So we also know that, in addition to just sort of theorizing about the benefits that AB12 is going to have related to post-secondary education outcomes, that there's actually research that shows that AB12 is likely to have a positive benefit on educational outcomes. There was a study done known as the Midwest study that surveyed youth who were exiting foster care in different states, some of which had the extension of foster care to age 21 already and some of which did not. So Illinois is a state that has actually made foster care available until age 21 for a number of years. And so outcomes for youth from Illinois were compared to states that did not have extended foster care like Iowa and Wisconsin. And the research showed that youth who had access to extended foster care were 3 times more likely to complete 1 year of college and 2.5 times more likely to obtain a BA. In addition, being in care was associated with a 38% reduction in the risk of becoming pregnant. So we know from this research that the extension of foster care is likely to have a very significant impact on post-secondary education. We also know, however, from looking at these outcomes from the Midwest study, that while AB12 is likely to improve outcomes, foster youth are still likely to lag behind their peers. And that's really what the focus of this webinar today is about how you can provide additional support for these youth to leverage this opportunity. So AB12 creates a huge opportunity to improve post-secondary education outcomes. But it's not a panacea. It is not going to solve every single problem that exists in the foster care system. And so for all of you on this call, regardless of the context in which you're working with foster youth, you have a role to play to leverage this opportunity that's created by AB12 to improve educational outcomes. So in the past, the way that the systems of child welfare and post-secondary education function, they were really separate. Child welfare and post-secondary education did not overlap. Typically, at the point that somebody was entering post-secondary education, they would be exiting the child welfare system. If somebody stayed in child welfare beyond the age of 18, it was generally just to complete high school, and so the relationship was really one of sort of a handoff. Now, with AB12 in place, there is much more of an overlap between child welfare and post-secondary education. So the systems are actually going to be working with the same youth at the same time. Youth are going to be in care for these additional 3 years up to the age of 21, and so there really is a need to create much more of a bridge between the child welfare system and systems of post-secondary education to be working with these youth simultaneously. So with that, we're going to move into, that's sort of our introduction, and we're going to move into the next segment of our presentation, which is how to encourage and support youth to participate in post-secondary education. And so I'm going to turn it over to my co-presenter, Chelsea, who's going to talk about some of the things that can be done to help support youth to succeed in post-secondary education.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I think the quote at the top of this slide says a lot. You know, the intervention of one significant person at a critical point in the life of a student is extremely significant to educational success for students from low-income backgrounds. I feel that holds true in my experience, as well as working with youth in the foster care system now. You know, one step from early preparation is just to motivate youth from a young age. This is probably the most important factor in education success, and that's, you know, just to start early and include the caregiver. I work with youth in high school in foster care, and it's one of the goals that I kind of have is to make sure that the foster parent is aware of how the youth is doing in school and what kind of support that they need, because, you know, that can ensure that when the youth goes home, the discussion about education is still happening, you know, when the youth isn't accessing a service provider that focuses solely on education like myself. And then bring in resources early. That's the county educational liaisons. I'm in Solano County, and we use the Office of Education, and they specifically have a homeless and foster youth person that deals only with those youth, and that is a huge benefit. School counselors, they know the youth, and they know the youth's academic performance, and, you know, they're sometimes the best help as far as, you know, what the youth can do in applying for post-secondary education and even thinking about, you know, the requirements to get in. Foster youth services and the Independent Living Skills Program. Every county in California has the Independent Living Skills Program, and they work with youth from as early as young as 15 until they're 21, and they can be a huge help in getting the youth the financial resources to pay for some of the tests and any, you know, tutoring or educational support that the youth might need. That is a great resource. There are a variety of resources that can and should be brought in as early as middle school to start planning for college. The Cal State website provides grade-by-grade guidance for 6th through 12th graders on planning for college admissions, including what courses to take and when to start planning for taking standardized tests such as the SAT, which is required for admission for CSUs. The APG requirements and standardized tests. In order to enter four-year public universities, youth must not just take the courses required to graduate from high school, but must take specific classes known as the APG requirements, which includes specific requirements for English, math, history, science, foreign language, and art. And they, range from, one of them is just maybe 2 years to needing 4 years, depending on the subject. Even if a youth is not planning to attend a four-year college, encourage them to strive to complete the APG requirements because, these classes are there to serve as a foundation for when they enter college and so to help them build the knowledge that they'll need. And it can make a complete difference in a youth that has taken the APG requirements and attending, even a local community college versus a youth that has not taken the APG, completed the APG requirements and attending community college and maybe doesn't have some of the skills that are built in and advanced in taking these courses at your high school. And then if I can get the next slide.
So the next thing to take into account when working with youth is encouraging youth who think they can't go to college. So we have this great quote on the slide, "No one rises to low expectations." The danger of the self-fulfilling prophecy is a very real danger. And so it's very important to set high expectations for all foster youth regardless. And so there's been a lot of research done about the impact that the self-fulfilling prophecy and what people believe they can do or believe they can't do, the impact that that can have on somebody's actual success. There was an experiment done called the Oak School experiment where at the beginning of a school year, a teacher was told that all the students in her class had been tested, and some of them had been tested. The test had indicated that they were likely to excel that year, and then other youth, the test indicated that those youth were not likely to excel. In fact, the youth were just assigned at random into these two groups. No actual testing had been done, but the teacher was led to believe that this testing had been done. And at the end of the year, the youth where the teacher had this higher expectation did, in fact, do significantly better than youth where the teacher had not had this expectation. And so this is just one example. This type of experiment has been replicated over and over and over again. And so it's very clear that if you are working with a young person and thinking to yourself, this person can't go to college, they just don't have what it takes, you're going to convey that message to that young person and probably actually impact whether that young person does or doesn't go to college. Conversely, if you're thinking to yourself, I think every youth that wants to go to college can make it, and you're conveying that message to that young person, then you're going to increase the likelihood that they're going to be successful and be able to go to post-secondary education. And there's ways that you can build this into the ongoing communication that you're having with young people. So saying things like, when you go to college, and as Chelsea was talking about earlier, starting this from a very early age, not waiting until senior year of high school to bring this up, but instead just at whatever point you're working with a young person, just building in that expectation that they're going to go to college. And I've done this training in person where I've had people say to me, well, but there's some youth who they have so many mental health issues or trauma or this or that. I just don't see how they're ever going to be successful in college. And I always say to those people, it's true sort of statistically that some youth are going to end up going to college and some youth aren't, but you should not assume that you know who those people are and that you know which young people are going to end up being successful in college and which aren't. You should just go with the assumption that they all are able to be successful, and in having that assumption and conveying that, you in fact will create that reality for a lot of young people. And Chelsea, did you have some additional thoughts on this you were also going to add?
Yeah, I do. In Solano County, I work with the Independent Living Skills Program, and specifically I work with high school foster youth. And when I first met this young person, it was last year, right, maybe 2 months into the school year, and she's a junior at this time. And I picked her up after school and was driving her to my office, and I was asking her, how did school go that day? And she told me, well, I only attended 2 of my classes. And we had the discussion around, well, why did you only attend 2 of your classes? And she said that school just wasn't something she was interested in. Nobody really cared whether she felt nobody really cared whether she went to school or not. So she started getting more involved, with ILSP and with our education program specifically. And, we kept telling her, college is a possibility even though you haven't been doing that well these last couple of years. And so she kind of took it to heart, and she didn't believe us until we went and toured. We took a tour of a local community college and of local colleges, and we talked about it. And recently, and this is, an update as of a week ago when the quarter progress reports were sent out home, she brought hers into our office, and she's passing all of her classes. I think her lowest grade is she has 1C. And so from a youth that I worked with that was barely attending all of her classes to now she's, passing them, and that would assume that she's also attending them regularly. I think, it just shows the dramatic improvement that you can make when you hold them to higher expectations and show them, the potential that they can have regardless of, people setting low expectations for her in the past. And I feel like, it just shows that any youth has that potential. And then if I could get the next slide. And so with that being said, I think it's also important to realize that there are other ways to inspire and motivate youth. While it's important to hold them to high expectations, there's some you can show them physical motivational things such as the long-term financial benefits of going to college and pursuing post-secondary education. And Debbie talked about the slide earlier that demonstrates the income differential versus young people that didn't go, that just have a high school diploma versus somebody that has an advanced degree or even, the bachelor's degree. And there's a dramatic income difference. And I know the youth I work with regularly tell me that they're motivated to get a job at the age of 16 because of the freedom they have of earning money to be able to do what they want with it. And so I think that the chart really does, motivate to an extent, the possibilities that they could have. And then explain the differences between college and high school. Youth that don't like high school or don't like attending classes in high school, sometimes they have their reasons. They don't like being there from 8 to 3. Well, college offers the opportunity to have a flexible schedule. The student chooses their own classes. So if, English wasn't their favorite, maybe they might be interested in creative writing or math or science. There's, a much wider range of options, including vocational training and opportunities for extracurricular activities, online classes, Saturday and weekend schedules. And this is particularly important for youth, once again, who didn't like high school, to understand the differences and that, how high school was like, college is completely different. And then it's an opportunity, to meet youth that have similar interests in these in the classes that they'll be taking and are interested in taking. And then also, discussing the non-academic benefits, which include more career options, a chance to explore new fields, opportunity to develop critical thinking and communication skills, and then meet new friends and develop connections. I think that, if you have the opportunity to talk to youth about actually visiting a college campus, they can really see just from the first hand what it's like with, the different clubs that occur, and the different, interests that everybody has on campus, where, very few people are in the same programs, and I think that they'll really find people that they can connect with. And then career assessments and interest inventories. The career assessments can be a fun way to expose you to the range of career options available, as well as bring home the reality of schooling needed for most career paths. I know that some high school counselors like to give the true colors kind of test that kind of gauges what career you might be interested in. I know, I think at my school they did it to us when we were in sophomores, just to see, the kind of options that were available that you maybe hadn't even thought about. I know the youth that I've seen take this have never gotten the same thing, and they range from podiatrists to working with animals. And then holding youth accountable can include setting clear expectations, asking every month about school and grades, following up on tasks related to education, using text for reminders about tasks. And I think that's important just because youth more and more are just intertwined with technology, and if you can find a way to incorporate that in an educational way, and just reminding them about homework, reminding them, asking them how did their test go, it could really just hit home about how integrated everything can be, and really that support could just be widespread. And then accountability should be expressed as authentic concern rather than punitive, and then bring caregivers in the process as well. And I think those last two things can really, strengthen the youth's commitment to pursue, post-secondary education, just knowing that they feel supported and that it's a possibility. And then connect to mentors and role models. Connect young people early and often with foster care alumni who are enrolled in college or who have completed post-secondary education or training. I think an easy way, if you're wondering how you maybe can do that, an easy way is just to check in with the Independent Living Skills Program in your county, because they work with youth until the age of 21, and I'm sure most of them are still in contact with some of the youth that are the alumni of their program, and if that is something the young person is interested in, they can easily help them with that. And then expose youth to college, so taking them on field trips, attending events at the college, at a local college, whether that's a sporting event, music, or anything they have going on. And I think I've heard one time where a foster parent said that, they maybe didn't attend an event, but they just took the youth to lunch on campus, and just being in that environment for an hour and a half got that youth thinking about, college possibilities, because they were just sitting there eating lunch and looking at, what life was like at college for other youth, young people. And then the next slide.
So we're going to be moving in now to kind of a different phase of the presentation this morning, which is talking about some of the nuts and bolts of college. And I wanted to just remind folks before I jump into that about a couple of things. One is that an audio recording as well as the PowerPoint slides for this presentation will be available. We're going to be sending them out via email and also posting them online. And so for those of you who are inquiring about whether you can get access to the slides, that will be made available. Second thing I want to remind folks of is that we're covering quite a bit of material fairly quickly here in this hour and a half that we have. But we do also do an in-person version of this training, and so, which is longer, it's 3 hours. It's obviously more interactive because we're able to do it in person. And so if you're interested in bringing that to your community at some point in the next year, my contact information is going to be on the very last slide, and so you should definitely get in touch with us about that. The last thing I want to say is that we do have a couple of other written resources that we're going to be sending out to everybody after the presentation, and these are some guides that were actually put together for us by the Chancellor's Office of the 3 different public systems, Community College, Cal State, and UC, that go through a lot of the information that I'm going to be talking about in this second part of the presentation in terms of nuts and bolts about admission and financial aid and such. And they were specifically made for foster youth, and there's these great, really handy one-page checklists that you can provide to foster youth that they can use to plan for everything that they need to make sure they get done to be able to get into college and enroll and all of that. So hopefully those will be useful resources for all of you on the call. Finally, if you do have questions as we're talking, feel free to go ahead and send them in through the questions panel, and we'll get to all the questions at the end. So a quick overview of post-secondary education systems in California. We've got the 3 public systems, so there's the community colleges, Cal State universities, the CSUs, and the University of California, the UCs. There's also a number of private colleges that exist in California and schools that specifically are designed to provide career and technical education, and we're going to be talking a lot more about those in a little bit. And so I'm going to turn it over to Chelsea now, who's going to talk to you about community college.
So speaking to my own experience, I began at a community college, and then I transferred. So I've kind of done the application process and gone through the different college institutions and their systems. So I have a lot of experience in this area. So community college, it serves the greatest number of foster youth of all three systems. It's an estimated 7,000 to 10,000 foster youth. And then there are 112 colleges throughout the state. So there are colleges in every community, and they have a wide range of options. There's examples of programs are accounting, journalism, computers, television and film, art, engineering, early childhood development, human services, dental assistant, architecture, auto mechanics. So it's very, wide-ranging at what they can provide. The requirements to get into community college are relatively low compared to that of a CSU to UC. And with a high school diploma, you can get a 2-year associate's degree, transfer to a 4-year university, and then they also offer career and technical education. And so they really, provide youth the beginning stages of higher education, and they're easily accessible. And if you're, interested in the community college in your area with technology, getting so much intertwined in our lives, I think that every college website I visited, it has become user-friendly and just lets you know, about that school and what programs they offer. Not every community college offers the same program. So, for youth that are thinking, I don't want to go to the community college because it's in the same city that I've lived in and went to high school with, and I'll be with the same youth, there's another community college in the next county over, and maybe that has a program that you might be interested in. And some of them even offer dorms, even though I know that's a relatively few number of community colleges compared to the 112. And then if I can have the next slide. So for community colleges, the admissions and enrollment process for them, eligibility, is relatively available to anybody interested in going. They don't have an SAT or GPA requirements. They don't require essay, letters of recommendation, or application fee. A high school diploma is not required for admission, but it is required for federal financial aid. So really, if a youth express interest, even while, they're late in their senior year and are concerned about, whether they'll graduate and if they would still be able to attend community college, this is a discussion that it's still eligible to them. The online application is the www.cccapply.org, and you can apply to any community college in the state through that website. The Board of Governors fee waiver, it reduces the fees for admission at community college, so they wouldn't pay the tuition, which I think at this point is $36 a unit at the community college in my county, and it reduces it. There's still, the health fee, I think that they'll pay depending on which fee waiver they'll be accepted to for the Board of Governors, and even that is like $10 compared to, a few $1,000s that they can have to pay for the CSUs and the UCs. Assessment and assistance with academic planning. All new students are required to take an assessment test and are strongly encouraged to meet with an academic counselor, and that's prior to them registering for classes, but after they've already applied to the school. And then the assessment test would be for English and math, just to see where this young person is at and what classes maybe they should start in case they don't have the strongest foundation, or maybe they do and they're ready for college. And there's often a wait, so this should be done early. If a youth knows in the fall of their senior year of high school that the community college is something they're interested in, some have their application for the next year available that early, and then some, you could start the discussion with the financial aid representative at the community college and with the counselor there about the youth interested in attending the following year, just to make sure that everything is on track for that youth and they won't, get stuck having to fill out paperwork at the last minute or waiting for financial aid or getting into classes which, at this point are so impacted because of budget cuts. And then AB 194 gives foster youth priority enrollment. Priority enrollment, it's a huge benefit but must be taken advantage of. You need to check the specific college's websites for deadlines and registration dates. And priority enrollment, that's another thing with classes being cut and then just they're filling up so quickly. Priority enrollment is an advantage. And then once you know that date and your ability to register for that class as a young person, it just ensures that you're better supported in achieving, the degree that you're going after. And then, benefits of self-identifying as a foster youth. I know from personal experience and then just from working with other foster youth and then talking about foster youth about this issue, once they're out of foster care or those, now the option to stay in extended foster care, they don't want to be, some of them don't want to be connected with the system in any way. Sometimes it's just the stigma associated with it or maybe they had a bad experience and so they sometimes they choose not to identify as foster youth. There is benefits in doing so in that, you're then eligible for the priority enrollment. The college wouldn't know otherwise unless they self-disclose that they're a foster youth. On the application for financial aid, they're available for more scholarships. They're available for a lot more in federal financial aid if they disclose as foster youth. And then just, by filling out the paperwork and giving it to the school that shows that the youth is self-identifying as a foster youth, they're eligible for school resources that they wouldn't otherwise be eligible for if they weren't, a foster youth, and saying that they're from a socioeconomic, disadvantaged background. And then the next slide, please. So community college is just one in the California, post-secondary education system. We have the California State University and the UC systems. These are four-year institutions, and they have more stringent admissions requirements. The requirements, they have minimum GPA and often need to take SAT or other standardized tests, and their application includes the essay and the letter of recommendations and has a fee associated with it. And then the deadline for this application is November 30th, whereas for community college, it's a rolling admission, so they can apply and get accepted and attend in the next semester term, whether that's in fall or spring, whereas the CSUs and the UCs you typically only accept youth in the fall, where there are some exceptions that do other admissions terms. They accept freshman admissions and transfers from community college. So those are the ways that they'd get into California State University or UC if they decided to start off at a community college and transfer. For those that don't feel they can enter right as freshmen, but certainly, foster youth should be encouraged to apply as freshmen. And then 1,200 to 1,300 foster youth are in the CSU system, so that's, dramatically lower from the 7,000 to 10,000 youth that are in the community college system. And, I think that just speaks to the requirements that are there just to be admitted into the CSU and UC systems. And then their application process includes, the A through G requirements. So did they do the English and math and the science classes that were required in high school to fully prepare them, for a rigorous academic plan, and then the standardized testing, so taking the SAT and, the score associated with that, and then realizing that there is a deadline for that, and that, lots of youth apply regardless, foster youth or not, and so they, sticking to that deadline, just being aware so that the youth has the application complete in advance, and maybe it's just, the last week it's just reviewing the application for mistakes so they could turn it in on time. And I think, you're just really supporting the youth through that process because it can be, complicated and it's complex, just having all of these things that go with the application. And so just following up with the youth because it's something that, we I would discourage from them doing it alone, because even filling out the application for financial aid, there's so many boxes, and realizing which ones you check and which ones, to leave blank. And there's also community resources available to help youth with these applications. And, speaking to the Independent Living Skills Program in every county, are more than capable of helping the youth fill out these applications. And, just also going back to making sure the foster parent is on the same page as what's going on with this youth in terms of their educational goals they have for themselves and the application process, and just really supporting them through this entire process. And I'll turn this back over to Debbie for career and technical education.
Great, thank you. So before I jump into career and technical education, I wanted to go back and sort of note one thing related to community college enrollment. So Chelsea was talking about the Board of Governors fee waiver, and she mentioned the the student health fees that get charged to students. And what I wanted to say about that is that the Board of Governors fee waiver waives the per unit enrollment fees that students have to pay for classes, but they do not completely waive the nominal additional fees. So there may be things like student health fees or student activity fees that can be $10, $20, $25 per term, something like that. And these fees, if they don't get paid in a timely manner, youth will be prohibited from registering for classes. So it's an important point to note, because and they can also find themselves dropped from classes. So they may be able to register, but if they haven't paid their fees on time, they'll suddenly discover that they've been dropped from all the classes that they registered for because they didn't pay that $20. And so if you're working with foster youth, it's a really important thing to make sure that all of those fees get paid by the deadlines, because it can be a small amount of money that can have a huge negative impact, unfortunately, on youth who are interested in attending college. So I just wanted to make sure people were aware of that point. And with that, I'm going to move into talking about career and technical education. And so career and technical education is, some people may know this by the term vocational education or voc ed. This is kind of the new terminology that's being used for vocational education. And it covers a huge range of types of fields: building trades and construction, graphic design, fashion design, auto repair, healthcare, energy technology, paralegal, cosmetology. These are all areas where a person doesn't necessarily need a BA or an AA degree, but it's more specialized career-focused training where a youth can get a certificate that will lead them directly into some particular career option. So these are more targeted career-focused courses. They're often shorter-term programs. So if a young person, if it seems daunting, the idea of going to school for even 2 years to try to get an AA degree, they can look potentially at one of these shorter certificate programs, which range, but they can be 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, that type of thing. A lot of schools are now doing something called stacking, where different certificate programs build upon each other. So in particular, say in the field of healthcare, where there's a lot of different career options, from becoming a medical assistant to a phlebotomist to an x-ray technician, to have some overlap between these different certificate programs, rather than just having a student get a bunch of certificates that sit next to each other, but instead that they can actually build on each other. Financial aid is available for these programs. There's a lot of different options for pursuing career and technical education. So community colleges are a great option for this, and different schools specialize in different things. And so I know that there's a school in Alameda County that has a whole big program specifically for landscape design, if somebody is interested in that. And there's programs that have, big programs in auto mechanics or specializing in healthcare fields. And so there's a lot of different options available through the community colleges. There are also the regional occupational centers and programs, which provide high school students, 16 and older, and also adult students, with career and technical education. There's 74 sites for these across the state. And then there's also private vocational schools. And so these are schools that you may have seen advertised on TV, like ITT Technical Institute or DeVry or Field. And these also offer career and technical education. However, they should be approached with great caution because these private schools tend to be very, very expensive. And so young people who choose this route often find themselves coming out of the school with huge amounts of student loans to pay off. And there's been actually a lot of attention in the news recently about the predatory nature of some of these schools, where they actually seek out youth who would be eligible for lots of student loans and don't necessarily explain all the repercussions of taking out these kinds of loans. And so if you're working with a foster youth who indicates that they are considering one of these private schools as an option, I would strongly recommend that you have a conversation with them and really stuff out what the financial obligations are and what they're going to be getting themselves into and what they can expect to get out of the school in return, and whether that really makes the most sense in terms of an option as opposed to pursuing the same type of program through community colleges. In particular now with the priority registration that's available to foster youth, it makes it easier for foster youth to be able to get access to the classes that they need through the community college. So it's just a consideration that needs to be given some thought. So I'm going to talk a little bit about financial aid. And of course, financial aid is very complex, and we do not have time in this seminar to get into a lot of detail about all the different types of financial aid. But there are a variety of options for financial aid. There's federal grants. The most common one is the Pell Grant. There's Cal Grants available through the state. There's private scholarships that are available, work study, Board of Governors fee waiver, which we talked about a little bit a few minutes ago. And so this, again, waives the fees for youth who are below a certain income. So this is not specifically just for foster youth, but for any youth who meets certain income criteria. And Chafee, which we're going to be talking about more in a couple of minutes. And so you can see that there are both a lot of different options, and which is great and also makes the system somewhat complicated. The next thing I want to say about financial aid is this: what you have on your screen now is some average costs for attending the different systems. And if you look at the cost for community college in particular, at first glance you might look at it and say, whoa, that seems like a lot of money. And you often hear that one of the barriers that foster youth face when thinking about post-secondary education is the cost. However, when you put this in the context of AB12 and the fact that the cost of room and board is essentially addressed through AB12, and so a youth can be potentially still living with a foster parent while they're going to school, still living with a relative caregiver, maybe in a transitional housing program that pays the full cost of their housing, or in a supervised independent living placement where they're receiving some funds directly to pay for housing. In combination with the Board of Governors fee waiver, which makes that $864 essentially go down to zero, and then some additional financial aid that might be available to cover the cost of books and supplies and other incidentals, in the world of AB12, college actually becomes quite affordable. And so I think the most important thing to keep in mind with this is planning early for this. And in order to access a lot of these different types of financial aid, if somebody shows up at the college a week before school starts and says, hello, I'm ready to go to school, chances are they've missed out on a lot of these opportunities. But if they do plan early, apply for everything that's available to them, utilize the resources that are available, college can actually be quite affordable. And I'm going to turn it back over to Chelsea.
All right, so talking about financial aid, it's one of the big questions is how to pay for college, especially when you're a former foster youth or still an extended foster care, still foster youth, and some of you feel like they're navigating this process by themselves, and that's again, we're support and just connecting them to community resources and other people in the community that can help them fill out these applications and navigate this process. Can make a world of difference, especially when it comes to financial aid, because this is an extremely complex thing. And even filling out the FAFSA, which stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, it's a pretty big application, but can be made easier by getting help with it and help in completing it. The website is www.fafsa.gov. If you use a search engine like Google and just enter FAFSA or Free Application for Federal Student Aid, sometimes the first one to pop up is a .com website, and that will actually charge a youth after they filled in and took the time and filled out the application. It'll actually charge them to submit it to the Student Aid Commission, which is where this is processed. And it's important for them to realize, and for you working with foster youth, working with them and completing possibly these applications, is to realize that it's a free application, so there's no cost associated with it, and they don't have to pay to fill it out. Even getting help is free in their community. And then realizing that for the purposes of financial aid, there's a difference between independent versus dependent status. Independent meaning that you're the sole person paying for your education and you don't need to report your parents' income. And then dependent, especially on the financial aid application, the dependent status will ask you for your parents' income information. Well, all foster youth who are in the system after the age of 13 are considered independent for the purposes of the FAFSA. If they're concerned, sometimes about proving this, they can get a letter from their social worker, and then certainly the ILP program in their county can help them in getting this letter that just says that, this youth qualifies for independent status for the FAFSA. How to get help completing the FAFSA, the ILSP, the foster youth services in their county, financial aid officers, high school counselors, and then, just even the liaison at the community college that works with foster youth can help them in completing the application, or can refer them to, events going on that help people. I know in January, when the application is made available, they have what's called Cash for College workshops at local high schools, and I believe every county in the state does this. And the youth can come in, they can go with their foster parent, or they can go, with whoever's supporting them and filling out the application, whether it's their social worker or whatever role that you have with supporting them. And, any questions they have can get answered. And I think it's a 2-hour workshop, and they can even complete the application there with a trained, high school counselor and financial aid officer that knows really how to answer these questions appropriately. The deadlines for the FAFSA are March 2nd for maximum aid, and this applies for the other state grants as well that have, so for financial aid purposes, March 2nd is for the most the youth would be eligible for, but someone who misses this deadline should still apply at whatever point they decide to go to college. Community colleges, their deadline, I think they'll go into September, and the youth would still be eligible for it, but realize, there's a lot of youth, foster youth, and not that are applying for financial aid, and there's only so much available, and you want the youth to have the most to be eligible for maximum aid versus later in the year in December and January, when we're coming up on another fiscal year and there's not as much left over. And then community college, prior to start of term, the sooner the better. So if they know that that's something they're interested in, applying for financial aid for the school list for their local community college can help them get the ball rolling, because there's a lot more youth attending a community college versus a CSU and UC, and those are financial aid applications that have to be processed in the financial aid office. They want to have their application, and the sooner the better. Communication, so check the email address that you put on the application frequently. This is one of the primary ways that the school and that this the Student Aid Commission, which is the state for people that disperse the state grants. That's their way of communicating with the youth. So realizing what's the best email address to put on this application, what's something that the youth will check pretty frequently, whether that's weekly or they have certain times that they check it during the day, just to make sure they're not missing something that's important that could come up, that they need to submit something, or just to ensure that everything is complete and turned in so that they would be eligible for maximum aid. Then offer to review letters received regarding financial aid to help students understand what they mean. Sometimes there are complex terms in there that they're not quite sure what it means, or they're asking for something that the youth, hasn't had to deal with yet. And so just to help to clarify and even, inform them of, the financial aid office at the college they're applying to, or their high school counselor, that there is somebody that can help answer their questions. And then if you get a letter saying you don't qualify, don't ignore it, get help, whether that's speaking to the college financial aid office, which should be, if you got a letter saying that, that should be your first stop, and just ensuring that the youth is getting the financial aid to help pay for college. And then the Chafee application, they must complete the FAFSA and separate in the separate Chafee application. So it's like a one-page thing, and it asks similar questions that the FAFSA asks, but it wants to ensure that the youth was in foster care and that they are eligible, and all foster youth should apply. And we're going to talk about I'm going to talk about the Chafee grant coming up, and just realizing that there is the impact of AB12 income on financial aid. If Debbie has anything she'd like to add about that, I believe AB12 will cover room and board. So thinking back to that chart.
If I can jump in on that, one question that comes up sometimes is, in particular, if a youth is receiving income through AB12 directly, so if they're in one of these supervised independent living placements that allows them to receive income directly, one question that comes up is, does this impact their financial aid? And at this point, the answer to that question is no, it does not impact their financial aid. So in financial aid regulations, there's very specific language that says that income received through Title 4E of the Social Security Act, which is what child foster care income is exempt from needing to be reported on the FAFSA as income. And so the one caveat I have to that is we haven't actually received official guidance from the Federal Department of Education about this question, although we have made a request for that. But our reading of the regulations, it seems pretty clear and pretty straightforward that this income does not need to be reported on the FAFSA as income for the purposes of assessing eligibility for financial aid. And I'll turn it back over to Kelsey to talk more about Chafee grants.
Okay, so the Chafee grant, it's a requirements are that the youth was an open dependency case or ward after their 16th birthday, and that they're under 22 as of July 1st of the year that they're applying. So if they haven't received it yet, and they're 20, as long as they're under 22, they're still eligible for it. The Chafee grant, it's up to $5,000 per year. In California, it's administered through the California Student Aid Commission. The application they must complete the FAFSA and then the separate Chafee application. And then, it's up to $5,000 for college or vocational school to apply. They can, if you Google, there's a search engine and it can look up everything anymore. And if you just Google the Chafee grant application, and once again ensuring that you're at the .gov website, and then that will give you the link to the application. It's web grants for students, and just simply putting that in, that'll pop up with the Chafee grant application. Going to the high school counselor or the financial aid office at the college or ILP, they can certainly get the application in paper, and then it'll just give them information on where to apply online for it. There's an award priority system, so this gets kind of tricky. All foster youth should apply, but first-year students don't usually receive the grant, but applying puts them in line, in this priority system for receiving grants in subsequent years. So being a former foster youth and, just hearing other foster youth about, the issues that they're dealing with financial aid, the Chafee grant is something, that always comes up. Like, I didn't receive my Chafee. It's just realizing no matter what somebody tells them, they should apply for the Chafee grant, regardless of if somebody says, oh, you don't get it your first year. Just encourage the youth to apply and have their application in the system so that when they fill out the FAFSA next year, then the Student Aid Commission will put them higher up the priority system to be awarded the Chafee grant. And then the enrollment requirements, they need to be enrolled at least half-time and maintain satisfactory academic progress. And the satisfactory academic progress is what the specific college they're attending has it stated as, and that's something that you could easily access on their website. And then the program of study, must be at least one academic year long. And then, $5,000, it can go a long way in paying for college and just offsetting, the financial burden that can come the question I always get is, how am I going to pay for college, from the high school juniors and seniors that are considering going, and just showing them, there are grants out there like the Chafee that can give you up to $5,000. And looking back to that chart where, CSUs are, $6,000, that's taking a big burden off of that tuition cost by simply getting a grant like the Chafee grant. And of course, there are many more out there. And then I will turn it over to Debbie to talk about what you can do to help young adults stay in school.
So getting youth into college is the first important step, but of course we also want these young people to be successful in college and stay in college and complete whatever degree or certificate program or transfer or whatever it is that they are wanting to do. So we're going to talk a little bit about retention and how to help young people stay in school. Ensuring basic needs are met, such as housing, is obviously essential. In particular, if youth are in something like a supervised independent living placement, or if they've exited the foster care system and living on their own, just making sure that young people are aware of their housing rights and how to behave responsibly as a tenant and keep their housing and that type of thing is really essential. Collaborating with other significant adults. So there's often a lot of different people in the life of a particular young person, so the caregiver, the social worker, college support staff, maybe a CASA, an attorney, and so making sure everybody is working together to support these young people. Identifying local resources. I'm going to talk in a minute about some of the campus support programs that are available, and so figuring out what those support programs are specifically in your area and being able to refer youth to them. And then developing relationships with local college personnel. So the more you know individual people at the colleges or at the child welfare agency or at the other support programs that you can connect youth to, the easier it's going to be. Motivating and holding youth accountable, so tracking them and asking them about their grades and if they're going to school and just letting them know that somebody is looking out for them and following up and can be a motivator for youth to stay in school. Providing practical information, so a lot of the stuff that we talked about today in terms of admissions, enrollment, financial aid, etc. And just being a support. So one of the things that I've heard from a lot of students in college is that a lot of times they just need somebody to vent to or to talk about how hard the test was or that they're frustrated with a particular professor or whatever it is. And so being that kind of resource can be of great benefit to foster youth who are going to college. And I wanted to close by talking about some of the specific campus support programs that are available for youth. So the first are comprehensive campus support programs, and these are programs that go by a variety of names. Often they are called Guardian Scholars, Renaissance Scholars, Promise Scholars, that type of thing. And they offer support services, both academic and non-academic, and they're located at a variety of campuses, including community colleges, CSUs, and UCs. And we're in the process of revamping the California College Pathways website, which is the website that is there on your screen. And so the information that's up there right now is a little bit out of date, but we're going to be launching an all-new website in the next month or so. And once we do that, there will actually be a search mechanism on that website where you can look by region or by type of school and find out which schools have these types of comprehensive campus support programs. There's also something called the Foster Youth Success Initiative, FYSI, and these are liaisons that are located at every community college. So every single one of the 112 community college campuses across the state has a designated FYSI representative. They're often located in the financial aid office, although sometimes they might be in the counseling program or something like that. And they can provide assistance navigating all the different academic and student support services and accessing financial aid et cetera. And in the resources that I'm going to send out to everybody after the webinar, there is a link that you can use to identify who the FYSI liaison is at any particular campus. There are also programs known as EOP and EOPS, and so EOP is for Cal State and UC, the four-year schools, and then EOPS is what it's called at the community college level. This is a program that is for low-income, educationally challenged students, so it's not specifically for foster youth, but foster youth often do qualify, and this program provides a wide range of assistance. They can provide book vouchers, child care referrals, academic support, tutoring, assistance with financial aid, a whole host of resources. And so it's a really, really valuable program. A couple of things to know about it. If somebody is at the community college level and they're interested in participating in EOPS, they do have to be a full-time student, although if they have a disability, there are some exceptions to that. And they do have to apply for the EOPS program separate from their application to the community college. And these programs are impacted, and so they do fill up at times, and they are limited. And so if a young person knows that they're going to be attending school full-time at a community college, they should be strongly encouraged to apply for the EOPS program as early as possible, because it really is a fantastic resource that's available. If they're going to a Cal State or UC, they can apply for the EOP program through their application for college. So it's all kind of packed into one application at that level. I also wanted to mention the disabled students programs and services. So 20% of foster youth are documented as having a learning disability, and so many of these youth may qualify for the DSPS programs at schools. They can provide a variety of specialized support. They can do things like provide additional tutoring, provide note takers for students, longer time to complete tests, et cetera. And so this can be a great resource for youth who qualify for this benefit. And then there's a lot of other services available that most students don't take advantage of that can be really valuable resources. So they can get assistance doing an education plan, there's tutoring programs, specialized resources for parenting youth, financial aid offices, career and transfer centers, college and career success courses. So these are courses that somebody can take when they enter community college to help teach them study skills and time management and note-taking and things like that that can really improve their outcomes moving forward as they participate in college. And Chelsea, did you want to add anything about your own experiences with these programs?
Yeah, so at the community college level, I was involved with the EOPS program, and at the CSU level, I'm in the EOP, and then the Guardian Scholars that is the one that they offer at CSU East Bay, and they're extremely beneficial. They used to not have priority enrollment, and these were the programs that you would go to be eligible to get priority enrollment for each term. Some of them offer financial assistance. At community college, the EOPS program at my community college offered support to pay for books. Books are extremely expensive, and the price always seems to go up. And that is a way to get assistance with paying for educational supplies and tutoring. If the youth needs it, it's an excellent place to go, because the tutors that they have in these programs and in these in the campus support programs specifically work with that program. So it's not a tutor at the tutoring center at the school that maybe a couple hundred other youth are coming into on a daily basis to seek tutoring. It's the small population of youth that this program, that the service may serve. I know the Renaissance Scholars has their own group of tutors that only the Renaissance Scholars youth are allowed to use. And at CSU East Bay, I think, there's like less than 50 foster youth in the Renaissance Scholars program. And so just realizing that, with that small population, they have targeted services. And it goes back to, self-identifying as foster youth, because that's how they can get eligibility into these programs and get the academic assistance, whether that's, individualized counseling. I think that's the biggest help for me, because I felt like, I didn't really have learning disability that I needed to address, and but the counseling, when there may be 20,000 other students going to that school and going to general counseling, these programs and services have their own counselors that meet with youth and discuss, graduation requirements and what the youth specifically needs to take to graduate. And just once again, it ensures that there's support for the youth, in reaching their post-secondary goals, and that it's, individualized and targeted for them versus, the general student population. And they're really I encourage youth that you work with to apply for these programs. And, even though there's programs that have a long wait period or a lot of youth apply, don't discourage them in any way, because these programs are extremely beneficial and can only further support them in reaching their goal of graduating.
Great. And so to close, just some final kind of logistical information. So as I had mentioned earlier, we are going to send this out to everybody, the PowerPoint presentation. In addition, all the materials along with the recording of the presentation will be posted at cafosteringconnections.org. More information will be available soon at cacollegepathways.org. So as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we are in the process of revamping that website. So in about a month or so, there'll be just a tremendous wealth of resources available through that website related to foster youth and higher education. And finally, if you are interested in bringing this training and an extended, more interactive version to your community, we're available to provide it to child welfare agencies, to social workers, juvenile probation officers. We can also do it as a community-wide training that incorporates caregivers, CASAs, attorneys, etc. You can contact me at debbie@johnburtonfoundation.org. And so we have a little bit of time left to do some Q&A. So I'm going to turn it back over to Devin, who's going to moderate the questions based on what you all have been submitting during the webinar.
Great, thanks, Debbie. So thank you all for submitting some great questions. And I've got a few here that I'd like to go through. If your question is not answered, I apologize, but feel free to email Debbie if you need some clarification if we don't get to your question. So Debbie, the first question I have here is, will the social worker still be the same person after the youth turns 18 if they decide to remain in care?
So that really depends on the county. In a lot of counties, the answer is yes. They've decided to just continue the case with the same social worker who the youth had before they turned 18. But there are some counties who have decided to create a specialized AB12 unit. And so they have designated specific workers just to work with the non-minor dependent, the 18 through 21-year-old population. And in those counties, the youth would actually change social workers and move over to one of these specialized AB12 workers. So you really have to ask their specific county what they've decided to do in that regard, because it does vary.
Great, thanks. The next question is, with regards to financial aid resources for youth, are these financial resources available if a child reunites with their family before they turn 18?
So that, again, it depends a lot on what the resource is. So things like, well, it depends on a lot of different factors. So the first factor is going to be the age that reunification happens, because there's a couple of different questions on the FAFSA that determine whether or not somebody is deemed as independent or dependent for the purposes of financial aid. And if they're independent, then they don't report family income on the FAFSA. And so I believe, Devin, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the way the question is framed is, were you in foster care or a ward of the court at any point after the age of 13? And then there's also a question about whether somebody was in guardianship. And so if the reunification happened before the age of 13 and that young person was not in foster care after the age of 13, then their family income would be reported on the FAFSA, and that would impact potentially what was available in terms of financial aid for that young person. For the Chafee, it also depends on the age, and so it's based on what age the person was in the foster care system, and so there's not sort of a generic answer to that question. It's really dependent on a number of different factors that you'd have to look at. So you really have to talk to a financial aid specialist and look at the age the person exited care and what the family income was, if that needed to be reported, and those different types of factors to figure out what they did or didn't qualify for.
Great, thanks. The next question here is, does the GED or adult education unit, is it equivalent as a high school diploma to get financial aid to enroll into post-secondary education?
So yes, so people may or may not be aware, but there's new regulations that went into effect July of this year that do require a high school diploma or GED to qualify for federal financial aid. There are additional restrictions that went into place as well. And so when we've used the term high school diploma in this presentation, we really mean GED or high school diploma. So if the person has a GED, that counts the same as a high school diploma in terms of being eligible for federal financial aid.
The next question here, what about undocumented students who can apply for FAFSA? What's the process for them in applying for Chafee, and are they able to apply for Chafee?
You know, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that question. If I were to speculate, I would say that I know that the requirement for applying for Chafee does require that you do submit the FAFSA, but perhaps we can respond, we can do some research on that, and I can give a more definitive answer because I don't actually know how Chafee intersects with undocumented youth.
And a couple more questions here. What's the process for applying for the Chafee if the youth wants to attend school out of state or is already living out of state?
That's another great question. Devin, do you know
the
answer to that question?
I don't know. I wasn't sure. I thought you may know. So,
I think I may have an answer.
Great, so yeah, go for it.
So the youth, and this is something that they'll tell you when you're applying for the financial aid and for the Chafee. If you go to some of the workshops that are available at local high schools during, January and February, you're still eligible to receive, if you're eligible for the Chafee grant in your state. So if the youth is a California foster youth eligible for the Chafee and they attend college out of state, they're still able to receive the California Chafee grant. If they are already living in another state, it depends on if they're eligible for the Chafee grant. They can receive it at whatever college they go to, as long as it meets the requirements of being a program that's I think the Chafee grant is a year longer, and that they're attending full-time or at least half-time, and they're maintaining their satisfactory academic progress. They're still eligible for the Chafee and can still get it in the state that they were in foster care. Hopefully that answered the question. And I mean, I think that's still something that you can ask the financial aid office and the foster youth liaison at the financial aid office at the school the youth is interested in attending, but they're still eligible for it.
Great. Thanks, Chelsea. Yeah. And second to the last question, do foster youth always get their own education rights at 18? CASA has a youth who is 17, and that person holds their education rights now.
Yeah, so the answer to that is yes. When a youth turns 18, they essentially acquire all the same rights that any person would when they turn 18. And so the fact that they're in the foster care system doesn't negate the fact that they're now considered a legal adult. Of course, the exception to that would be if somebody had a court ruling that they were incompetent to make their own decisions or something like that. But barring something like that, the youth does acquire their own educational rights when they turn 18.
Great. And the last question, would a youth indicate income on their FAFSA if they're receiving the AB12 funds?
No. So the income is not required to be reported on the FAFSA. And, you should definitely talk with somebody in the financial aid office about whether or not that needs to be indicated in some way on the FAFSA. because that starts to get into a lot of the very technical details of filling out the FAFSA, but there are a lot of folks out there who have a tremendous amount of expertise on sort of the nitty-gritty of filling out the FAFSA, but the income does not need to be reported.
Great, thank you. Those are the questions that we received. And if we didn't get to yours, please email Debbie. And thank you all for being with us today during this PowerPoint. And again, it will be posted on the California Fostering Connections website. And we look forward to talking with you all soon, and have a wonderful day. Thank you, Debbie and Chelsea.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.